Jack staring off from a distance so
I didn't know
Test. How to watch it. I am Richard Brown. I am the youngest son of Garfield Brown. And it's I want to welcome you all here today for the special honoring, dedicating, and gifting of my father's Code Talker medal and war memorabilia to Crazy Horse Memorial. It's a great honor for our family and for the family of Mr. Korchek and Ruth. And right now, if we will all rise for the honor guard. Thank you. May you be seated? Thank you. Thunder Out Singers. At this time, I want to call up Mr. Chris Brooks for the opening prayer and smudging.
Oka, Betu Ashte, Yoni Ashte. Have all of you stand and pray, and they're going to go through the crowd and smudge everybody. So, smudging to the crowd. I'm going to say a prayer. And then my daughter's going to sing an honoring song. We're going to have like Chief Floyd come up and say a few words. Oh, kanka unshla chichapi ki ashtem betu kile unshapi ki tiwa he kile ate kile una shunkaluta umani ki vichachvi ki una wa kanka kile vichozani ki tashunka vitko kile tiwa he tioshpa ki unshapi baha kile unshaki ki. God, should we pray for great things? We pray for understanding. We pray for blessings for the family and this honoring today, in which we are having all the people that are here and a part of it. We wish good things for those and good blessings for everyone and the children and this next generation of the Brown family that is here to honor their grandfather and their father. And these things, pray that you midaki ayas, will still stay standing. Like Chief Floyd Han ki hai itkhanacha ki hai from the Red Cloud family.
Oyuta Kapo. That's Code Talker. Actually, you may all sit down. Amitake piampetu kile. Tukashila itoka bwahina je. Tasuke witko chiapi. Na hela hani na peluta okola kiche, suska okola kiche, opra. Hoyung hampetu ki oglone hampi akishita. Akishita ki lenat shanteti za okola kiche hechapi. Waichi chuzapi chans na tokata ki ayapi ki le duni koi rapish. What I'm saying is today I come before my ancestor from my mother's side, Tashukevitku Crazy Horse. I humble myself as a direct descendant. Today we honor our brother, our grandfather, and our son. He is a proud member of the Red Hand Society who gave his life in that direction as a code talker. Every veteran that you see here, because of 1851 treaty and 68 treaty and Article 6 of the United States Constitution, we did not have to join the military service. We signed a treaty to lay down on arms against anybody that opposes us. Yet, according to my grandfather, Red Cloud, he said that We have to defend our mother island. We have to defend our family, our children, the future generation. And we have to defend the relatives that come here to live with us but cannot defend themselves. It's a great honor today to be here, to say a few words in Lakota to give you an example of what the code talkers are. There's one, Garfield, Melvin, Red Cloud, Billy Red Cloud, and one from Wobbly. And the Navajo code talkers. I've been honored to meet the Navajos. From the bottom of my heart today, I ask each and every one of you, wherever you go, you see a vet standing there. Reach in your pocket. Don't question yourself how he's going to spend that. Because he's been to hell and back. A lot of the brothers here are homeless, hungry, lonely, full-blown PTSD, Agent Orange. If it wasn't for warriors like us, you won't enjoy this vacation. And I ask the Great Spirit to help each and every one of us. I want to ask blessings for all the military families and military that are here. All the military personnel that I recognize them as Red Hand Society. Strong heart. I see a young man sitting here. I honor you. Because we're on the territory of the treaty as a Lakota nation, I would like to sing this song to honor every one of us. Will you please rise? Hey, 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 Ahu, me takoyasu.
Thank you, Mr. Hand. Right now, I'd like to welcome the welcome address from the Crazy Horse Memorial Foundation, CEO Jadwiga, Zolkowski, and CEO Monique Zolkowski. Welcome them, please.
Yeah.
Just take a deep breath before you start
Yeah.
talking. So, just Good morning, and we welcome everybody to Crazy Horse Memorial for this wonderful occasion. Mr. Vincent Floriani, Consul General in France, and distinguished guests, welcome. Also would like to thank Richard Brown and his family for all the work they've done to make this program possible. The Garfield T. Brown family has made a tremendous gift to Crazy Horse Memorial with the Code Talker medal and many other personal items. We are honored to accept this collection for the Indian Museum of North America. The mission of Crazy Horse Memorial Foundation is to protect and preserve the culture, tradition, and living heritage of all North American Indians for the entire world to know that this is a race of people who live here and are remarkable, and that the Red Man has great heroes also. Crazy Horse was an exceptional human being, just as Garfield T. Brown was, serving their and honoring their people and their country. This is a beautiful demonstration of how the Indian Museum of North America grows, and we are pleased to accept this generous gift in the piece of the heritage of this proud Code Talker family. Mr. Brown's service to America saved hundreds and thousands of lives, and we know we would not be here today if it were not for his sacrifice. Even after wartime, Mr. Garfield honored the country by not sharing his experiences with his family, just as he was asked by the United States government. An honorable man indeed. To have these gifts is another fine example of how generous he was, brought up to be. And through his children, we see they carry that same good heart. We thank the Brown family, and it comes from Crazy Horse Memorial with all the respect and honor they deserve. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Right now, I want to introduce the OST Tribal President, Mr. Troy Scott Weston, to say a few words.
They said we couldn't hear in the back, so I figured I better pull this up to the top. First of all, I just want to say good morning, and that I am extremely privileged, humbled, and honored to be standing here today and to have this honoring is such a great thing. And to our veterans, I thank you for what you've done, because you've all played a role in our lives to be standing where we are today. Mr. Garfield Brown was a very quiet man. Never talked about anything. I can remember Rich and I grew up together. Played high school basketball, football, classmates. Graduated the same year. His father reminded me of my own father. Very humble, quiet. My father served in Korea. They never talked about their hard times, but they were proud of what they did. And I'm sure Mr. Brown was very proud of what he did, but at the same time he hurt because he did some things that he did not want to talk about. And the reason why things happened the way they did, because that's how I grew up with my father. But at the end of my father's life, he told me some things that he held inside of him for all of his life. And I'm sure that's what's happening. But to make things more clear, I believe they got to where they were because they prayed, they were humble, and they were men. They were warriors. And I believe this is the start of many more honorings for veterans that I know that we need to carry on even farther. You know, I look at Brandon sitting here. I remember when I was coaching basketball and he was probably this tall and going as fast as he could wherever he wanted to go. While he's doing it now. I'm proud of that. I'm very, very proud and honored that our young men and our young women are still stepping up to the plate and serving to protect the people of this United States of America. But most importantly, the people of our Oglala Sioux tribe. That's what I think about every day. So I want to say thank you to the family for remembering this and for getting this and letting me, my office, the tribe be a part of trying to sponsor some of the cost that went into doing this. So I just want to wish everyone a welcome, and I thank the Brown family for allowing us to be a part of your father's life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Weston. For the next speaker, I'd like to present the Secretary of Tribal Relations, Mr. Steve Emery.
Good morning. I greet you with a heartfelt welcome and a warm handshake. Welcome especially to the Brown family and to veterans and family members who are able to be here today. As a combat veteran, I understand the sacrifices that have been made by those who honorably serve in our military. We all come together to honor the service and sacrifice of you and your loved ones. Please accept my thanks and that of a grateful state of South Dakota. We are gathered here today to recognize the unique service of Garfield Brown, who so bravely spoke the language which generations of Native Americans have been forced to forget. Without his contribution and the contribution of others like him, the successes of the United States would not have been possible. The United States government had a history of fighting hard to immerse Indians into American civilization. In the late 19th century, the government forced many Native families to send their children to boarding schools, where they were forbidden to speak their languages or learn about their culture. Those who struggled to keep a connection with their heritage had to learn to speak in secret for fear of what might happen as a result. In 1917, the United States entered into World War I. At this time, citizenship had not been granted to all Native Americans, but this did not deter brave young Native American men from enlisting to fight for our nation. Over the course of the war, the United States used many different codes, ranging from European languages to mathematical equations. They were all broken by the Germans. However, soon the United States recognized the value of Native American languages, of which the Germans had no knowledge. For the first time, the United States used Native American languages as a weapon and succeeded. Try as the Germans might, they would not be able to break the code, and Native American languages would go on to be used and help win several wars. Garfield Brown bravely served our country during World War II. He used the Lakota language to send coded messages that were unbreakable by enemy forces. Without his service, the war would have looked starkly different. For all his bravery and sacrifice, Garfield Brown was sworn to never speak about his services as a code talker and loyally kept quiet. It was well past time that courageous men like Garfield Brown receive the recognition they deserve. Today we honor Garfield Brown and his history. It does not belong in the shadows, and it should never be forgotten. The donation by the Brown family to the Crazy Horse Museum is one step to ensuring that the contributions and sacrifices made by code talkers are never forgotten, that they are remembered, honored, and understood for generations to come. The Department of Tribal Relations, with support from the 9 tribal nations within South Dakota borders, is currently working with tribal veteran service officers across South Dakota and the South Dakota Department of Veterans Affairs to create and dedicate a memorial honoring code talkers and this unique history to be placed at the Capitol Lake. When completed, this memorial will also aid in shedding light where there once was shadows. And we do have several brochures if somebody would like to look at them. Thank you for your attendance here today. A special thanks to the Brown family. Garfield Brown was a brave man, a patriot, a Lakota, and an example to us all. Thank you. And can I have all the veterans stand up and be recognized, please? All the veterans in the crowd, please stand up and be recognized. And now, on behalf of Governor Dugard and the state of South Dakota, Executive Proclamation, Office of the Governor. Whereas South Dakota honors its many tribal veterans, such as Code Talker Garfield T. Brown of the Oglala Sioux tribe, he utilized his indigenous Lakota language to thwart the enemy and win World War II. And whereas Garfield joined the U.S. Army on May 8, 1942 at Fort Cook, Nebraska, and whereas during the North African campaign, Garfield T. Brown, Oglala Sioux tribe, and Anthony Omaha Boy, Rosebud Sioux tribe, utilized their Lakota language as code during the Tunisian campaign, and whereas on June 6, 1944, Garfield, carrying his radio above his head in chest-deep water, was among those who stormed the beaches of Normandy while under fire, and whereas Garfield served in Algeria, French Morocco, Tunisia, Sicily, Normandy, northern France, Rhineland, Ardennes, Alsace, and Central Europe, and whereas proof of his heroic service includes the Bronze Star and Bronze Star Arrowhead, 3 Bronze Service Stars, 1 Silver Star, Good Conduct Medal, Presidential Unit Citation, African, Middle Eastern, European Medal, and the French Croix de Guerre. And whereas it is fitting and proper as governor to recognize this dedicated hero of World War II. Now therefore, I, Dennis Dugard, Governor of the state of South Dakota, do hereby proclaim June 24th, 2017 as Garfield T. Brown Day.
Thank you, Mr. Emery. To continue on, in your program, excuse me, it's going to be switched around a bit. Right now, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mario Gonzalez, OST attorney and nephew of Garfield Brown.
to give a little bit of Garfield's background after the war, as well as some of the comments he made about the war. Garfield is my uncle. He was married to my mother's sister, Sona Wilcox Brown. I can remember Garfield since I was a small child. When he and his family, and my family, my mother and father and I were living down in the Nebraska Panhandle. And at that time, work was hard to get after the war. So a lot of the Native Americans would go down to Nebraska. There's a lot of irrigation over the Platte River. And during the summer, top beets, sugar beets, big potatoes. I'll try to talk a little closer to this microphone. I recall riding in cars with Garfield over those little hills. In those days, the roads weren't straight. And every time we'd come to a hill in Nebraska Panhandle, he would make the car go faster, go over the hill, so we'd feel light in the stomach, you know. And he seemed to enjoy making us kids, feel that way. Well, this was in the late 40s. I was just like 4 or 5 years old. By 1950, our families all moved around together in those days. So the Browns, Gonzaleses, Tienemans, all my mother and her sisters usually moved together different parts looking for work. By 1950, we found ourselves living at Lake Andy, South Dakota, where Garfield, my dad, and other family members were working on a Fort Randall Dam. I think one of my sister was born there, and one of Garfield's children were born there. So then next thing we knew, we were all living in Keroka, South Dakota, where Garfield's working as a mechanic for Hemingson's Garage. My father worked there as a body and fender man, so we were always moving around together. And then about the mid-1950s, Garfield moved to Pine Ridge, where he worked for the VIA Road Department for several years. And we stayed in Keroka, and some of his sons stayed there also, and we attended Keroka High School together. But I always remember Garfield because he liked athletics. And he would always take us to basketball games, football games, track meets. And when we grew up and got into high school, he was always there. His son Fred Brown and I would go with him to the Pearl Hotel to watch boxing matches, because in those days we didn't have television. So the Pearl Hotel had a television, so we'd go over and watch boxing matches. He really liked boxing. During the 50s, when I was growing up, my grandfather had a ranch east of Wambly. And I recall one time, Garfield and I went down to the dam to chop holes in the ice, and so cattle could drink. And I fell into one of the holes. And Garfield pulls me out, takes me up, drives me out. So these are, the things that I remember about Garfield Brown. Well, another thing I remember is that, and this would never happen today, I asked Garfield, could I take your Nazi flag and your German Luger to class for show and tell? I was about 3rd grade then. And he said, yeah. So I took it to class and displayed it, the German Luger and that big flag, and came back. That would never happen today. For show and tell. Well, Garfield was later I learned from family members that Garfield was an athlete too. And during the military, he ran a track meet, and he ran the 100-yard dash, almost or same time as Jesse Owens. So he was a world-class runner. He could have been in the Olympics if he really wanted to be. So his children all became athletes. Elgin Brown was a top athlete for Keroka High School. Basketball, 38 points a game. Track, quarter mile in 52 seconds. 100-yard dash, little over 10 seconds. They held the state track meet record at the Howard Wood Relays on the one of the events for many, many years, and he was a quarterback for Keroka High School. All-around athlete. And his other children were all good athletes. Fred Brown and some of his grandchildren, top athletes. So these are things I remember. But the family always talked about World War II. My father talked about it. He served in the Army Air Force. Garfield sometimes talked about his things that happened in World War II. We had family members. My Uncle Leo Wilcox served in the Pacific during World War II. But here's some of the things I remember Garfield over the years talking about during World War II. I remember him talking about fighting Germans in North Africa. I think he mentioned fighting Rommel, General Rommel, the German army tanks. I remember him saying that he saw General Patton, who I remember him calling him blood and guts in Sicily. And I remember him telling me, he said that when we left Sicily and we were heading out of the Mediterranean Ocean, he said when we got past Spain, he said we thought we were all going home. Instead, we turned north to England and ended up in England. And from there into to France, Omaha Beach, and then into fighting Germans in France and in Europe. I remember him telling me that once he and another person captured some German soldiers. I think he mentioned number 38 German soldiers. And I remember him telling me that when he was marching, he and his other comrade in arms out there fighting, were marching these German soldiers into back to his unit. The commander there was so happy and excited. He said, "Look at my boys! Look at what they have done! You know, bringing these German prisoners back into camp." I remember him talking about that, and I remember him telling me also about the 50th anniversary of World War II, because he got the privilege of going back to France and seeing the graves. And he said, you know, when he came back, he said, "I met this Lakota over there." And he stayed there after the war. He must have married into one of the families over there. And he said he came up to me and was happy to see me. And he said, when you were in Europe, he said he remembers you. Because I was there in 1981 on a lecture tour, and I went back a couple years later. And I don't recall ever meeting this Lakota person, but Garfield was excited that he had gone over there and met this individual from the Pine Ridge Reservation, the Lakota man. So these are memories that I have about Garfield Brown. And one thing that really sticks in my mind was during the Wounded Knee occupation. I was visiting Garfield, and he said, "You know something?" He said, "I can never hate a white man because they saved my life many times in Europe during World War II. I can never hate a white man." And so in conclusion, you know, I grew up around Garfield. I knew him very well. Our families were close. I'm very close to my cousins, his children, even today. And I remember Garfield as a very humble, good Lakota family man. And he raised a large family. He always provided for their needs, looked after them. And most of all, I remember him as a very, very proud World War II veteran. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Our next speaker, we are very, very proud of. He is Staff Sergeant Brandon Brown. He was born on September 25th, 1987 in Gordon, Nebraska, to Harold Brown and Gloria Sally Goings. Brandon attended high school at Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and graduated in 2006. He enlisted into the U.S. Army right out of high school as a 92 Alpha. Attended basic combat training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. After completing training at Fort Jackson, Staff Sergeant Brown's PCS'd to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where he was assigned to the 4th Squadron, 73rd Cavalry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division. Staff Sergeant Brown deployed twice to Afghanistan in 2007 and 2009. He applied for Special Forces and selection and was selected to attend the Special Forces qualification course in 2012. During his time in Afghanistan, Staff Sergeant Brown helped train, advise, and assist the Afghan commandos on 5 Afghan-led 3 enabled, and 7 partnered operations against the Taliban senior leadership in northern Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Brown's military education includes Advanced Leadership Course, Basic Leadership Course, Airborne School, Air Assault School, Special Combat, Divers Course, Special Forces Sniper Course, Statistic Line Jump Master Course, Combat Dive Supervisor Course, SEREC, and Special Forces Qualification Force. In September 2014, Staff Sergeant Brown graduated from the Special Forces Qualification Course as a Special Forces Weapons Sergeant. He then received his orders for 10th Special Forces Group, and upon arrival at Fort Carson, Colorado in December 2014, was assigned to SFOD-A-0215. Staff Sergeant Brown deployed once again to Afghanistan in June 2016 in support of Mission 5. Staff Sergeant Brown is married to his wife Felicia of Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and they have 2 wonderful children, Demetrius and Layla Brown. Ladies and gentlemen, please, with great pride and with great honor, I want to welcome Staff Sergeant Brown.
Thank you. You guys got me in the back. I know you guys have been having trouble with this microphone. You good in the back? All right. First, I want to say good morning, family and friends. I'd like to first thank my Uncle Rich, who did all the research and legwork to make all this possible. Thank you to the Crazy Horse staff for allowing my family to honor my grandfather here at Crazy Horse Monument. It's only right that we honor my grandfather here among the greatest warriors monument. Thank you to the Lakota Veterans Honor Guard, not only for your dedicated service to our country, but for taking time out of your schedule here to be here with us today as we honor my grandfather. To Monsieur Vincent, merci d'être venu. Le succès de cet événement est dû à des personnes comme vous. J'espère que vous appréciez votre séjour dans notre patrie. Merci. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brandon Brown, the grandson of Garfield Brown Sr. Growing up, one of the fondest memories of my grandfather is him sitting at the kitchen table with my dad, aunts, and uncles, telling stories of his pastime. My grandfather never shared too much about his time in the war. He only shared the funny and happy stories of that time. My grandpa was the epitome of a humble man. Grandpa Brown was a forward observer and communication specialist with the 2nd Battalion, 32nd Field Artillery, 18th Regiment, 1st Infantry Division. His job entailed being on the front lines, communicating back to the headquarters, the enemy's fighting position, and other intelligence, in Lakota, of course. I would like to share one of the stories with you all that my dad has told me on several occasions. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, Grandpa Brown was storming Omaha Beach, which was surrounded by steep cliffs and heavily defended. Omaha Beach was the bloodiest of D-Day beaches, with roughly 2,400 U.S. troops turning up dead, wounded, or missing. My grandpa carried a 55-pound radio with one hand over his head in chest-deep water while under fire. When he reached the beach, they were no longer taking effective fire. His commander said to him, "Corporal Brown, lift that radio over your head with one arm." My gramps responded with, "Oh, my gramps couldn't do it." To which the commander responded, "God darn it, I seen you carrying that radio over your head. Why can't you do it now?" And he responded with, "Heck, they were shooting at me." This is one of the stories I reflect on during my times overseas or when the training gets tough. I reflect on the code talkers and how their time in war was harsh, and even their lives back home were trying. The love of their country prevailed. Having been in the military for over a decade, I recognize the sacrifices, importance, and the burdens that are placed on the wives back at home. I know that if you do not have a stable family, stable family life back home, you're not able to focus on the mission at hand. Therefore, I would also like to acknowledge and honor my grandmother, Zona Wilcox Brown, as well. She not only was a supporting, fearless wife, but she was also responsible for raising my uncle Algin during these trying times. Like my wife, exuding strength, resilience, and selflessness in a very difficult time for our country. I've seen the struggles the wives have overcame back home, and it can attest to their courageousness. People need to understand that the wives back home play a tremendous role in the war as well. With that being said, I would also like to thank all the code talkers for their courageousness and sacrifices. Although being forbidden to speak their Lakota language, this language played a vital role in the success of the Allied powers in World War II. I'm proud to be American. I'm even more proud to be a Green Beret. But the thing I'm most proud of is being a Lakota. Thank you.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant Brown. Thank you. I haven't spoken in front of very many people very many times. Again, thank you, Staff Sergeant Brown. Our next guest speaker is our Dr. Joseph Dondelinger. He is a native of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, a country overrun in 1940 by the Nazi war machine. He grew up in a small town 20 miles southeast of Bastogne, Belgium, the town of Battle of the Bulge fame, and 20 miles north of the American military cemetery in Ham, near Luxembourg City, where General George S. Patton is buried at the head of several thousand of his soldiers, many of whom died so that Luxembourg might be free and independent again. Now a United States citizen and proud South Dakotan, Joe has been a professor at Augustana University since 1984, specializing in international affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Joseph Dondelinger.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I understand it correctly, as a symbol, the circle is very important in Native American culture. So is the practice of gratitude. Allow me to make use of the image of the circle and to show gratitude. To begin with, thank you, Richard, for the honor of being here today. Life sometimes works in strange circles. Let me give you a couple of examples. And the first one is only intended to show you how important, and how personal, and how unusual this second coincidence is. The president of Augustana University, for example, Robert Oliver, my boss, it turns out, is the grandson of General Lunsford Oliver, commanding general of the U.S. 5th Armored Division in World War II, which, so it turns out, liberated my hometown in Luxembourg on 9/11, September 11, 1944. To our distinguished guest from France, the division also liberated such French cities as Le Mans, Argentan, Compiègne, and Valenciennes. Now to my second example, relevant for today. Perhaps you wonder about my participation here today. My small part in this story begins on December 16th, 1994 in Belgium, during the 50th anniversary celebration of the Battle of the Bulge, at an official luncheon hosted by the city of Bastogne. I was escorting an American veteran, Edgar Bredbenner, who had fought in my hometown in December 1944, as the Nazi war machine returned in what is known as the Battle of the Bulge in the United States, or the Battle of the Ardennes in Europe. The veteran Ed Redbenner had become a close family friend and personal friend. And at lunch, which was attended by several hundred people, Ed was sitting to my right. The seat to my left was open. A young lady accompanying several gentlemen, obviously veterans, walked up and asked if the seat to my left was taken. I said no. She then called over one of the veterans who wore a red jacket. Earlier that morning at church, at the church ceremony, I had briefly caught a glimpse of a small group of American veterans all dressed in red jackets, and they were obviously Native Americans. The gentleman who took the seat next to me on that December 16, 1994, was Garfield Brown of Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Consider this twist of faith, or is it a circle? I'm a native of Luxembourg, born less than 25 miles from Bastogne, whose life was made possible by the courage of veterans. Like Garfield Brown. So here I was sitting next to a fellow South Dakotan, 5,000 miles away from here. What are the odds of that? Because it was such a meaningful event to me, I referred to Garfield Brown in a public speech shortly thereafter. Fast forward 20 years, 2016. There's a phone call. Hello, my name is Richard Brown. Yes. Do you know my father, Garfield Brown? 20 years later. 20 years. Oh my God, yes, I do. I know him. How did you find me? Somehow Richard had found my speech on the internet. Someone, not me, had put that out there on the internet. So to the young people in here, I want to tell you, don't put anything on the internet you would regret later, because it's going to come back to haunt you. Well, I checked my family album for a photo of the occasion. No luck. But there was a clip on a video which I had taken that day that showed Garfield Brown at the lunch table with fellow veteran GI Ed Redbenner, whom I had escorted to Bastogne that day. Now, why is it, or why should it be, our duty to remember men like Garfield Brown and Ed Redbenner? While they were fighting, while Garfield was fighting on the northern shoulder of the bulge, and Ed was fighting in my town on the southern shoulder of the bulge, and then 15-year-old young girl, my future mother, became a refugee, forced to evacuate her heavily fought-over town, located at a crossroads, to use the words of an airborne trooper of the 101st Airborne, on one of the 7 roads to hell, which was one of the roads to Bastogne. Thanks to men like Garfield Brown, my mother would have a home to return to. Since we have a distinguished guest and representative of the French Republic here today, please allow me for a couple of minutes publicly to thank him as well. While Garfield Brown was doing his part in the liberation of Western Europe, the 20-year-old who would become my father was struggling to survive on the other side of Europe in East Prussia on the Russian front. He had been dragged there by the Nazis in July 1944, just weeks before liberation of my hometown. You see, Adolf Hitler had not just invaded the small country of Luxembourg in 1940, but he annexed it in 1942, forcing military-age Luxembourgers into the Nazi army under severe penalties if they refused, including death and deportation or concentration camp for the families if their sons refused. This was a treatment also meted out to the young men of Alsace-Lorraine in France. Eventually, thrown into combat, despite his refusal to swear an oath to the Nazi army, in January 1945, while Garfield Brown was fighting in the Bulge, my future father deserted at first opportunity and was saved by a group of French prisoners of war working at a German farm in East Prussia who understood his situation and who took him in as one of their own. They all survived contact with the Soviet Army, which on German soil, I can tell you, or my father told me, was bent on revenge with a no quarters given rage. Thanks to the assistance of French consular officials, of which we have one present today, my father was repatriated in April 1945. Thanks to men like Garfield Brown, he too had a home to return to. Ironically, my father and Garfield Brown share a military experience: artillery battery communications. My dad was supposed to run telephone cable from the forward observer of a 105 millimeter battery. My dad called it cannon fodder, a cannon fodder death sentence. He used his mobility and battlefield confusion to desert the cause he hated. Garfield Brown served in a 105 millimeter battery and provided one of the most unusual forms of communication in all of World War II. He was a code talker. The Germans, as already been mentioned, were very good at battlefield tactical communication intercepts, tapping into phone lines and listening to short-range radio communications. But voice communications for artillery, targeting, and fire coordination were essential in a very fluid battlefield environment. To have a means to communicate while being intercepted, and you know you're being listened into, but you're not being understood, was a valuable battlefield asset. A well-trained code talker could communicate much faster and more accurately than using the standard method of encryption and decoding of messages. If Soviet artillery, for example, they called it the Queen of Battle, dominated by sheer quantity and massive firepower, American artillery in World War II was the most advanced at the time. Why? Because it was flexible. It had speed of communication, quick response, precision, and coordinated what they called time-on-target strikes, and it used them to devastating effect. A good code talker played an essential link in that successful communication. But the code talker did more than just talk. He developed a system of native words to designate military terminology. For example, different birds became different types of aircraft. Grenades were potatoes. The word code, for example, alphabetized, C-O-D-E, became the native words for cat, owl, deer, and elk. If he needed to alphabetize, the code talker could not just use the same word elk for the same letter E, English letter E, repeatedly. Because you see, E being the most common letter in the English language, a predictable code using the same native word could be broken. Thus, the code talker might use 3 different native words at random for the same English letter in the alphabet. All of this has to be developed, and all of this has to be memorized. Again, consider the irony. The languages which the United States government tried so hard to eradicate in Indian schools became the tools of immense value to the American military. The first instance of code talking and improvisation occurred in October 1918 in the Meuse-Argonne area of France between Choctaw speakers. The World War I's success was soon forgotten, until resurrected by the US Marine Corps in the Pacific in World War II. The US Army, however, did not follow suit. In Europe, US Army code talkers like Garfield Brown had to use their own initiative in cooperation with supportive unit officers to contribute their skills. After decades of secrecy, the story of the US Marine Corps Navajo code talkers in the Pacific could finally be told. Not so for the Lakota talkers in Europe. Let me give you an example. The very last sentence of a history book on code talkers reads as follows, I quote, "The role of the Army code talker remains one of the least known aspects of the history of World War II, unquote. We are here today to help change that and to remember what Garfield Brown and fellow Native Americans contributed to the victory over tyranny in World War II. I would not be here today if it wasn't for them. That makes it very personal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Don DeLinger. Our next speaker, I'm very proud and honored for his presence here today. Vincent Floriani, Consul General France in Chicago, with jurisdiction of the 13 Midwestern states in August 2014. Prior to this assignment, Floriani was Deputy Spokesman and Deputy Director of Communications and Press at the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Vincent Floriani is an alumnus of l'École Nationale d'Administration. Upon graduating in 1999, he was assigned to the United Nations Division in the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Paris. His responsibilities included Iraq, Libya, and reform of the Security Council. From 2002 to 2005, as an expert in the Security Council, Vincent Floriani served at the Permanent Mission of France at the United Nations in New York. He became head of the Press and Communications Office at the French Embassy in London in 2005, and in 2007 served in the British Department of International Development as exchange diplomat. From 2008 to 2011, he was Deputy Head Mission at the Embassy of France in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. Early in his career, he served in Romania, Indonesia, Kenya, and Uganda. Vincent Floriani is married and has 3 sons. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Consul General of France in Chicago, Mr. Vincent Floriani.
Bonjour. So, dear Tribal President Westin, dear Secretary of Tribal Relations Emery, dear CEO Jadwiga and Monique Ziolkowski, dear Mr. Brown, family, honored veterans and friends. It is a great honor and privilege to be with you today at the Crazy Horse Memorial to pay tribute to the memory of Corporal Garfield Brown, a brave man who was ready to sacrifice his life for France and Western Europe in the Second World War. I also would like to dedicate this special acknowledgement to all Native American soldiers from South Dakota, the Great Plains and beyond, who, like Corporal Garfield Brown, embarked on the difficult and dangerous journey to free a whole continent from intolerance, violence, and the tyranny of fascism. As we are commemorating this year the centenary of the entry of the US into World War I, we also have to remember all those who, a generation earlier, came to save Europe. Captain Brown belonged to the highly respected and admired group of the Lakota Code Talkers during the Second World War. Thanks to his bravery during the darkest hours of the conflict and the exceptional nature of his mission, he greatly contributed to the liberation of France and the overall Allied victory in 1945. As you have heard, Corporal Brown was a radio communication operator from the very famous division, 1st Division. Bound to secrecy, Corporal Brown had the unique and critical mission to transmit unbreakable coded messages in his native language during high-risk military operations.
You've heard also of the campaigns he fought in French territories of North Africa, in France and beyond. You also heard of the part he took in the June 6, 1944 Normandy invasion, where his bravery was recognized by American military authorities and he was awarded prestigious Bronze Star Medal. Battle after battle, Corporal Braun fought on the front line. He and his fellow companions from the 32nd Field Artillery witnessed the horror of the war. In recognition for his heroic deeds and invaluable contribution during the operation in France, the French government has awarded Corporal Braun, the man of the 32nd Field Artillery, prestigious decoration, 2 Croix de Guerre and the French Fourragère. 33 years ago, Corporal Garfield Braun and many young Native Americans put their ideal, their might and their courage to the service of the liberation of France and Western Europe, to the service of democracy and the dignity of humankind. Twice last century, in 1917 and 1944, American soldiers restored freedom to my country, France, and to other European countries like Luxembourg. The French people will never forget what they owe American, our steadfast friends and allies. From Lafayette and Yorktown, when France participated in the American Revolution, to the battlefields of World War I and the shores of Normandy, our two countries have always fought shoulder to shoulder to defend and promote our common values. On June 6, 1944, the D-Day landing changed the course of the history of humanity. Victory was still far off. There was much suffering to come, but hope was alive again for millions of French and Europeans. Today, it is that same hope, that same ideal that we owe to those valiant men whom we can never forget. To the French people, Captain Garfield Braun was a hero. His engagement is an example, an obligation for us and for future generations. His story needs to be told. There can be no future without memory. The torch that he and his fellow soldiers carried so high and so far, the torch of freedom, of dignity, of justice and democracy, still lights our way. Faced with the uncertainties of a changing world, let us strive to remain loyal to the legacy, the sacrifice, and the values of the heroes who liberated France and Western Europe. As we are moving out of the era of living memory, Mr. Braun's family's donation to the Crazy Horse Memorial and Museum is a remarkable way to keep the legacy alive and to remember the sacrifice of all the Native Americans of the greatest generations. Thanks to the courage of men like Corporal Braun, France has been living in peace for 7 decades. It is the longest period of continuous peace in modern French history. The links between France and your nation are very strong and ancient. I see a lot of French names around here. In that regard, I would like to salute a fellow Frenchman, Mr. Didier Dupont. He's a resident of Pine Ridge, has been living here for 30 years. He took a group of veterans from your area to Europe during the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Bastogne siege. It is another way to show France's appreciation, and his efforts make us very proud. Merci, Monsieur Dupont. France and the French people could not be more grateful to Corporal Garfield Brown and to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Consul General. Today, as we all know, is here to pay honor and respect to a person who I've known just as Dad. Growing up, Dad was very disciplined. He encouraged schooling, he encouraged respectfulness, and with my mom, they taught us the values of Lakota way of life. And growing up with Dad, knowing he was in World War II, but yet knowing the exact horrors and duties that he experienced, he would not talk very much about it. There were times when we only had 3 channels on TV, and there'll be a war documentary on PBS. He'd say, "Come here, Richard, sit down, let's watch." We'd sit there with him. And as the war footage went on, they'll mention places in Europe. And I could see his eyes kind of gloss over. I could see that in his mind, he was going back to that day, remembering what he saw, remembering his fellow comrades in arms. His eyes will gloss over. He'd say, "I remember that place." And he would not really express much of his emotions. He'd just sit in silence as we'd watch the documentary. There were times, though, that we'll be sitting around the table enjoying ourselves, and again, his eyes would gloss over, and he'd start remembering his buddies and say, "Why? Why did I survive? Why did my friends have to pass on, give the supreme sacrifice?" And sitting there next to him one time with my sister, Doreen, and watching him cry, a man, my dad, who was a very strong, hardworking man, to see him show such emotion, to show tears at the experience of what happened to him 60 years before in World War II. The horrors that he did not wish us to ever go through again. The horrors that were taken upon for people of their race, of their religion, of an ideology of hate. And he told me that they fought over there so that they will not have to fight over here. And he was fighting not only just for our family, for our freedom, not just for American freedom, but for world freedom and world peace. Now, as mentioned, on Omaha Beach, D-Day, as they mentioned, Garfield Brown carrying his radio above his head, chest deep water. But I digress. I want to go back to North Africa when he first landed at French Algeria, French Morocco. They did meet some French soldiers over there, and they wasn't sure if there was going to be a fight or not. But they joined forces with the French in Algeria. As they went forth to battle Rommel, they came to a battle many may know as Kasserine Pass. Dad said, "They kicked our ass there." They backed up, they regrouped, and they went forward. They pushed the Nazis back. They pushed Rommel back. And this is one of the battles of Kasserine Pass that the French government awarded the French Croix de Guerre to Garfield and his company. It was not long after that, before they were going to Tunisia, a soldier commented that the 32nd Field Artillery Battalion had at least 2 American Indians in their ranks. They were Choctaw, Arapaho, or I don't know. But in our first North American campaign against the Germans near Majiz el-Bab in Tunisia, 2 Indians came to the fore. The 3 Indians in the 32nd were Garfield Brown, Anthony Omaha Boy, and John Smith. At that time, our Fire Direction Center used a black plastic box decoder to keep our position secret. Fire commands had to be encoded, sent in, and decoded before action was taken. This was very slow. One of the Indians in our headquarters battery suggested that he and his friend in the forward observatory party send the observations back in their tribal tongue, something that would baffle the Germans as much as code. The 2 worked it out, honed their terminology for various orders, and made it work. At the time, our battalion was under the command of the 78th Battle Axe officers. I told the artillery allegiance officer that this new code system, they were tremendously impressed. The British, were always fascinated by American Indians. The Brits who came over to see these soldiers stood around as if I were showing them freaks. When I moved up to 2 Corps forward headquarters, they were very interested enough to have an Army record scan for possible Indians, at least artillerymen. And this is the beginning of Garfield Brown, Anthony Omaha Boy, John Smith being code talkers. Now, the first battle that they went to, the code used was such a great success that they helped push Rommel across North Africa and helped secure that. Now, in these times, after the Battle of the Bulge, after D-Day, after the invasion, as they fought through the hedgerows, my dad told me a story of how in the hedgerows they used clickers to identify themselves. So Dad was listening. He made the click. He heard a click, so he thought, hey, there's one of my buddies. He jumped through the hedgerow only to be standing next to a German soldier who, when he cocked his rifle, sounded just like the clicker. They looked at each other with such surprise. They both turned around and ran separate ways. And that was the story somebody he told were the good times. And into northern France, our Lakota culture came into effect before they went off to war with our traditional ceremonies. And there was a time in northern France where they came across this farm. They were in a barn, resting, finally getting a break from battle. They were in this barn resting, and my dad told me, in the middle of the night, this giant hand grabbed him from his forehead to the back of his neck and shook him. He woke up wondering what it was. He then woke up his platoon and told them, we got to get the hell out of here. As they proceeded to leave, they started hearing artillery fire, artillery barrage. And not a quarter mile away, the barn they were staying in got a direct hit. Now this was, I believe, our ancestors looking out for him so that he can help protect Europe. Also, in northern France, these 3 Indian code talkers, along with a fellow soldier called Manuel Sosa, who was one of Dad's best friends. And he writes in this book is called Proud Americans of World War II. And in this book, Manuel Sosa tells this story. Do you remember the Indians used to be in our outfit? They were mostly forward observers, 3 of them. Garfield Brown, Anthony Omaha Boy, that was his whole name. And John Smith. John Smith was a drinker. He was 39 when he was drafted, and he was wild. I went on leave with him one time in England. In France, he was the same way. He'd go to a pub and come back all beat up. I'd ask, what in the hell happened? Oh, he'd say, I saw some of those black guys telling me the women, they were American Indians. No offense. He'd pile into them and he'd beat up everyone. He was outnumbered. I went into town with him one time in England, fish and chips joint. He was a tall guy. I was a shrimp beside him. It was late. He was already feeling pretty good. The place was loaded with GIs. Then a waitress or owner called, time please, meaning they were to close. And everyone should leave. Of course, nobody moved. So a little time later, she called again, time please, and nobody moved. John stood up and said, out. He said, if you don't, I'll throw you all out. That got the GIs moving. Manuel Sosa goes on to say, Garfield Brown, he and I were on the track team together. Every time I'd do something good, he'd do it better. Omaha boy had worked with the rodeo. We called him Chief. I caught him once twirling a rope. He was good at it too. He was very quiet. But I got inside of him one time. We were on reconnaissance together. I asked him about the rodeo. Did you ever ride a horse? He asked. I was born and brought up on a horse, I said. Of course, I'd never been on a horse in my life. Oh, well, gee, that's great. Someday we'll find some cows out in the field and we'll ride them. Garfield Brown and I were like this together. Used to run together, race together, real good buddies. So Omaha boy told Garfield about it. Well, we were on a farm in France one day, and 3 cows in there, young ones. Let's go get them here and see how good you can ride, said Omaha. He twirled the rope and he caught the darn cow, right by the horns. He got a rope around the belly and everything and said, okay, get on. I want to see how you ride. Let Garfield ride first, and I'll ride after him, I said. Garfield gets on and Omaha gives the cow a whack on the bottom. The cow goes up and Garfield goes flying off, around and off. Okay, Sosa, you're next, Garfield says. Sosa says, like hell, I say, and jump over a barbed wire fence, fast as I could go with the 2 of them chasing me, way back to the battery position. Laughing like hell. And Garfield said, I never saw you run so fast in my life. I could always beat you in everything, but I don't think I could beat you jumping over that barbed wire fence. Sosa says, well, if you had 2 Indians chasing you, you could. And see, these are some of the stories that he told about us. But there were times that I think, on great reflection, he needed to express himself. And he expressed that in silence with tears at times. Garfield fought in North Africa, Tunisia, Sicily, Italy, stormed the beaches at Omaha Beach, fought through the hedgerows, Central Europe, Northern France, and the Battle of the Bulge, and ended up going into Czechoslovakia. This was a very hard moment for him to express to me one day, where they came across a concentration camp. And knowing that the rumors and stories that they were hearing about this tragedy were true. As they went into the concentration camp, seeing the piles of bodies, seeing the emancipated people, and the horror that they went through. And this child came walking towards him, thanking him, thank you. And I get choked up as Dad did when he was mentioning this. And that the kid was just so happy that they were free to see the Americans. And his dad hugged him, gave him some water, a chocolate bar. They visited for a while. And after a few minutes, the young boy passed away in his arms. And that's when he got angry. God damn it, he said. Why? Why does this have to happen? Why does there have to be such tragedy, such torture for any person, especially based on religion or race? This is why we were fighting. This ideology has to stop. And that is why they fought in France, in Europe, to help defeat this ideology, to free Europe, to free the world. And using code, as many Native Americans have for many tribes, help save not only a lot of soldiers' lives, but the families of innocent civilians who were caught in the middle of this great battle, of this ideology of conquering the world. And today, with our donating and gifting of our Father's Code Talker medal, this is one of many stories out there, and hopefully many more will come to be told of World War II and their heroics by many peoples across, not only American people, British, French, Belgian, all the peoples of the world who came together to free the world and to keep it safe. And with all our active veterans and all the veterans of Korea, Vietnam, Operation Freedom, and especially to those still fighting today overseas, remember them every day, especially my nephew, who we're very proud of, Staff Sergeant Brown, who has given their lives to our freedom so that we may gather here and live in peace and harmony. Thank you. Itaki Ayase, we are all related. At this time, I want to call up Oglala Sioux Tribal Vice President Darla Black.
Tokahia, Ampetuaste, Chicha. Na Duaya Hihunip Gehena Ija Wopila Hecha. In my beautiful Lakota language, I greeted you with a warm heart on behalf of the Oglala Sioux tribe. But I also want to acknowledge these women veterans that are standing over here, as I am one myself. And I also want to recognize my nephew here. We pray for our Lakota veterans. We pray that they come home. But today, I'm going to also do a closing prayer for you with the Brown family in mind. As Lakota people, we honor our mothers and our fathers. And Zona was a good friend of my mother's. And one of the things that I admired is that Garfield and Zona did a wonderful job with her children. All the children that are here have worked for the Oglala Sioux tribe and still are working with the Oglala Sioux tribe in some capacity. So we want to thank them for their service as well to the people of the Oglala Sioux tribe. I also want to thank the drum group, for without the drum and without the singers, we would not have an Oglala Lakota nation. If you would please give them a round of applause. I also want to thank my grandfather for his beautiful words and the song to acknowledge Chief Red Cloud. When our Lakota people go into battle, they are also given a Lakota name to pray so that they will come home. And so I thank my grandfather for sharing that with us. I also want to thank Governor Dugard's office for such a huge honor for Corporal Brown. And on behalf of the Vice President's office, I will submit a resolution to the Oglala Sioux Tribal Council to also choose a day in honor of Corporal Brown. It is only right, and in our Lakota people, we are a tribe that honors our own, but we also are a tribe that we recognize the red, the yellow, the black, and the white of the two-legged people on this earth. We are all related, and we carry that in our heart. There's a resurgence with our young adults that are moving in that direction, which is beautiful to see. So today, as I do my closing prayer for the family, I'm going to ask the family to line up here. And in our Lakota tradition, we acknowledge them, we hug them, we support them, and we encourage them. Because no matter how many years it is, today is a beautiful day for their father, but it's also a very sad day. For those of you that still have your mothers and fathers, cherish them, because it's difficult to be without parents. So if the Brown family can please line up here, so the people can come and shake your hand as I do a closing song for the ceremonies. And I want to thank the family for inviting me to come here to help them. I am very fond of this family, and I have been a family friend to them for many years. And I want to thank all the Oglala Sioux Tribe veterans that are here for taking that time out of their busy day to come here to be a part of an honoring for a fellow soldier. Mitakuye oyasi. Ho tunkashila. Holea petukikuta kia hitwana oshion la pie. Honaku he sapa kile inja waka. Namakoche kile unkitob. Holea petukia hitwana oshion la pie. Na mitita kuye kile na inja washakia pie. Na awalankokte na akezania tiata. Kihuni unkte tunkashila. Na ugna chante shichap seche. Na ugna inja Takojala ki inja hena. Awala kokte tunkashila. Chinkshi, chunkshi. Takoja. Chue, chui. Hena inja awala koki. Heonse unsha che chiche. Grandfather, Great Spirit, I ask that you look down upon us on this beautiful day. You look down upon us on our sacred black hills that belong to us, Grandfather, on a sacred day like this. We also ask that you recognize the family, strengthen them and guide them on this day. They may have a broken heart, Grandfather, but guide them and lift their hearts so they can have a beautiful day. Garfield T. Brown. Garfield T. Brown. Garfield T. Brown. Garfield T. Brown. Ahe Tawayo. Ahe Tawayo. Ahe Tawayo. Hey. Tukashela Wakan. The drum group want to sing a prayer song. We ask the people to come and acknowledge the family of Garfield T. Brown in a good way. Support them, encourage them. We ask the veterans to come through first.